Hey you guys, it's me, Rhonda. Welcome back to my channel. I'm hopping on here real quick. If you're new here, welcome. I am happy that you're landing on this video. If you are one of my subscribers, welcome back. I am happy that you are watching. I wanted to just jump on here and do a quick little video because I shared in my in my shorts, this book that I just finished, and it's called A Shepherd Looks at Psalm 23. Y'all, it was so good that I decided that I just wanted to share a little bit of the takeaways. I don't want to share enough that deters you from not getting the book, because I think it would be a great study tool just to study this one psalm. And the thing is I went and grabbed one of my other study Bibles that I had thought I didn't study or didn't read through and highlight the psalm in, but I did it with that Lisa Harper study that I did, and it was already um, underlined and stuff, and received from that point of view, from just ever how she did the study along with her. Y'all, what am I trying to say? What I'm trying to say is every time you read the psalm or read a passage or a verse, you can take it in differently every single time, because it's whatever the Spirit is laying on your heart at that moment is what you need to glean from it, to take away and to meditate on. And so when I picked up that Bible and I read through it, I'm like, well, that's not even how I see it now. And so it's almost like I had to stop a minute and really look at how I had written the notes from that before, especially after reading this little book. So what I did was I just went ahead, y'all, I wrote in my church Bible. I just did. I wrote in it. It's broken in. Nothing can hold me back now, right? It's got the ink, it's got the highlighter, it's got a colored pencil. It's good to go. So anyway, what I thought I would do is, now even with my Jesus Bible, the Jesus Bible has little commentary, and this actually happens to have a commentary specifically on Psalm 23, the first 6 verses. However, I'm really not going to utilize that because it also takes you off into a different perspective from what this little book does. But what I want to share from this little book, this book is actually written from a shepherd, a sheep rancher is what he calls himself. And he explains the psalm coming from a sheep's perspective. And once you wrap your head around that and then you read the psalm again, it is like, wow. Because, Jesus is our good shepherd. We are his sheep. And we kind of leave it at that little analogy, that little, storyline or whatever. It's like, he's going to take care of us. The flock's out in the field, and he doesn't want us to go astray, so he just kind of keeps us all settled in. It's so much more than that. So I'm going to just jump in here, and I actually was trying to make it look like I was organized, but y'all, I'm not. I wish I would have highlighted and underlined in this book as I read along, but I just read it so quick. In 2 days I finished it. It's only 12 little chapters. It's just so much that you don't even want to stop reading it. You just want to, what is he saying next? What is he saying next? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to read Psalm 23 first, just straight up how we would normally read it, like in our prayer time or our quiet time. But then I want to just kind of break it down just a little bit, just enough to get your appetite whet for what this book can bring to your study time or bring to your studying of this particular verse. And then I'll let you guys make the decision if you think this book is something that you want to go ahead and get. So let's get started. I'm just going to go ahead and jump in and read Psalm 23, the Lord is my shepherd. And this was written by David, who we know is a shepherd. And he was taking care of his father's flocks the day that Samuel went out to retrieve him and to anoint him. And he was out doing his thing. And so this is a psalm more than likely didn't write it while he was young. This probably came about many, many years later after many, many, many trials and tribulations and attacks from the enemy and attacks from family members and things like that. As he got older and went through life, these kind of things fell on his heart to sing out to the Lord. But the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Even that time that I read this through, I was a sheep, because I've read this book and I can totally see now that connection where he got this. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of go through the little places that may get your attention and may help you kind of, I don't know, get a connection to see like, wow, yeah, okay, let's see, that might teach me something, because I'm telling you, it's really changed my perspective on how, what an amazing shepherd Jesus is. So the little thing that I highlighted, I didn't highlight it, I actually put the little piece of paper. Today, it says, many who either study or read the scriptures in the 20th century come from an urban, man-made environment. That's talking about us. So that's why I love cultural background, because we haven't got a clue as to how these people lived and what they struggled with. We can't even wrap our head around their struggles because we're so busy in our struggles. So when we read historical books and cultural backgrounds, it's so helpful for us to understand what was happening in this time. So it's saying that, you know, in the 20th century, people are unfamiliar with subjects such as livestock, crops, land, fruit, or wildlife. They miss so much of the truth that is taught in God's word because they are not familiar with such things as sheep, wheat, soil, and grapes, which is used throughout the Bible. And how often do you read a passage that says something about grapes and you immediately just think of a cluster of grapes or wine? You know, that it's just like an immediate thought. Nothing beyond that, nothing about the soil they come from, nothing about the dry land, nothing about how long can they go without being watered or fertilized or whatever. None of that even crosses. It's like, oh, grapes, Publix, cluster of grapes, or wine, the ABC. You know what I mean? It's like our perception and understanding is so shallow, in my opinion, to what it actually is. So it says, yet a divine revelation is irrevocably bound up with the basic standards of the natural world. And that is so true. We just have no understanding of like the earth, the creation, what actually springs forth from it, and why God created it the way he did. So the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. So mainly the first chapter is just an introduction of how he wants to explain this book to better help us understand. And the first chapter, the chapter does not go along with the verses, so I'll kind of skip forward. But the Lord is my shepherd. He's talking about, let's see, let me just go to my first little thing. Y'all, this is going to be one of those videos that is going to seem kind of rambly, but if you just hang in there, I promise you'll get something out of it. I don't know how good, but it's going to be, you'll get something out of it. So he's talking about the shepherd, and he is saying that I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. So there remains the moving realization that we have been bought with a price and that we are totally and really not our own. And he is well within his rights to lay claims upon our life. And he's sharing that when he was when he first stepped into shepherding, he didn't realize much about it. So he kind of got the bad end of a deal, got some really desolate land that he thought, oh yeah, I'm going to buy this piece of land. Well, the people who sold it, they knew what the land didn't have, and they still sold it. So he learned as he went, the author of this book, as he walked his walk, how the role of a shepherd, how important it is, and what it means to lay down one's life for the sheep. So just hang in there. The day I bought them, I talk about the sheep, I realized that this was the first stage in a long-lasting endeavor from which then on I would, as their owner, have to continually lay down my life for them. If they were to flourish and prosper, sheep do not take care of themselves, and at some point they require more than any other class of livestock, endless attention and meticulous care. So you can't just put them out in the pasture and turn them loose, is what he's saying. And it was no accident that God had chosen to call us sheep. The behavior of sheep and human beings is similar on many ways, as we'll see in further chapters. Our fears and timidity, our stubbornness and stupidity, our perverse habits are all parallels of profound importance. Okay, another fun fact was Psalm 23 might as well be called David's hymn of praise to divine diligence, for the entire poem goes out to recount the manner in which the good shepherd spares no pains for the welfare of his sheep. And then we're going to skip to the second verse. It says, or the second part says, I shall not want. The second emphasis is the idea of being utterly content in the good shepherd's care and consequently not craving or desiring anything else. And he talks about how the sheep don't know, and it's up to the shepherd to just like see before the sheep, see what the sheep are aiming to do, because they're aimlessly living. They have nothing. They are just aimlessly living. And it says it's imperative to keep a balanced view on the Christian life. And to do this, we are well to consider the careers of men like Elijah, John the Baptist, or the Lord himself. To realize that all of them experienced great personal privation and adversity. One of the fallacies that is common among Christians today is the assertion that if a man or woman is prospering materially, it is a significant mark of blessing, but rather that is not true. You say you are rich and I have acquired wealth and do not need a thing, but you do not realize that you are wretched, pitiful, poor, blind, and naked, just like the sheep. Jesus took upon himself great pains to point out to anyone who contemplated following him that it will be quite impossible to serve two masters. One belonged either to him or the other. And then he goes to talk about the sheep person that lived next to him was not as kind and loving to his sheep. So his sheep were not as prosperous looking and healthy as his were. And there was a time that would come where when they would fence off the properties, they would fence the properties down to the edge of the water. And then the drought would come and the water would recede. And then the sheep's on the poor man or the poorly taken care of side, they would follow their fence line down because that's what they did all the time. And then they would see that the fence is open. They would go around the fence and then they would literally go over to this guy's pasture and overstuff themselves with the luscious green stuff, make themselves sick. So there's things like that we don't understand. So it's kind of like, be content with what God has given you. Stop looking at the other person's stuff they have. If anything, you should look to see if they have enough, and if they don't have enough, then you can offer to give, to help. But you never lust after what someone else has, because you don't know what that person had to go through to get it. So you going around the fence to the other side and trying to get what they have sprouts trouble. Just saying. So anyway, and another thing is, let's see, he let the land be neglected, the sheep be neglected. He didn't take care of them health wise, cleaning wise, and things like that. They only had polluted, muddy water to drink. There was lack of salt and other trace minerals that is needed for these animals to thrive. So a good shepherd knows this, that they will not lack of anything that they need. So what he's saying is, you take care of your sheep. A good shepherd takes care of his sheep. So the next one is, he makes me lie down in green pastures. And y'all, I'm just barely breezing over these because I want you guys to get that little bit of flavor of, oh, that I'm going to get this book. I don't even know, it was probably like $9 or $10. It says, he makes me lie down in green pastures. Let's see, what did I want to leave y'all with in this chapter was, let's see, I kind of wish I would have highlighted it a little bit just so that I know that where I was at, but I thought I could pick it up. Dun, 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 dun. Awkward moment. Mainly, it was just that we live the most uncertain life, and that any hour can bring disaster, danger, and distress from the unknown. Life is full of hazards, and no one can tell what day will produce a new trouble. So the shepherd always has to be on guard. So it's never like Jesus has a day off. He's always on guard, watching over us. And then one of the first impulses is to when we have days like that are full of these hazards, is just to get up and run from them. But in the midst of our misfortune, suddenly comes the awareness that he, the Christ, the good shepherd, is there, and it makes all the difference. Just like he can walk into the pasture of his sheep, and just his presence alone can calm them down, because they recognize him, they know his presence is there, they know what he brings to the table, so to speak, when he is there. He's gained that trust in them, and that's what a good shepherd does. And then the next one, he makes me he makes me lay down in green pastures. So he's talking about the things that would make a sheep lay down. That's what I think he was trying. There's only 4 things that will actually, there's 4 factors that will affect a sheep to be comfortable enough to lay down. Most of the times they don't. They're just so afraid of everything that they're constantly on guard. So the Owen, 4 requirements are met for them to lay down. Owing to their timidity, they refuse to lay down unless they are free from all fear. They won't lay down unless they are free from frictions of others within their flock. They can't have any adversity going on in the flock. Everybody has to be in a good mood. If tormented by flies or parasites, the sheep will not lay down. And lastly, they will not lay down if they feel in need of finding food. So they must be free from hunger. So this chapter just goes on to let them know that they are being provided for. So from the sheep's point of view, they lack nothing. They will lay down and they will rest, because they need rest, because each day they get up, they're going further and further up into the grazing lands where they have to rotate pastures and things like that. So they need the rest. They can't always be on. And I said that says, when the eyes are when my eyes are on my master, they are not on those around me, and this is a place of peace, talking about trying to keep the relationship with the sheep and the shepherd, so that the sheep he can just walk into the field. They see him, they know that everything's okay, because all eyes on him. And the 4th chapter is, he leads me beside quiet waters. talking about that most people aren't familiar with. Sheep can go for months and months on end, especially if the weather is not too hot, without actually drinking a long drink of water. And what the shepherd does is provide them feeding times throughout the day. And if he has to, he stays up with them late at night. If they have a long travel day the next day, he will stay up with them late at night because the dew falls and they get just enough from grazing the dew on the grass as they're eating that will hydrate them to keep them going. And if he needs to, he will get up super early in the morning once he's put the sheep into, his keep for the night. They set up these little keeps, like little places where the shepherds would rest as they're traveling, and they would get up the flock together, and they would all lay down and they would rest. But the shepherd would get them up early in the morning, rattle them around, get the dog out, get the other shepherds out with him, and get them rallying so that they would eat early enough that they're still getting the dew from the ground, so they've got enough water to get them to the next spot. Because remember, we're in a desert. That's what's so amazing, is these flourishing flocks were in a desert environment, and the shepherds were so smart, and the sheep learned to trust that shepherd with everything they had, because he proved to them through progress and teaching and showing, and them thriving and breeding and growing, and every time they turn around, something good was happening. You know what I mean? So they learned to trust him, so they followed him. They knew his voice when he'd come into the pasture and speak. They knew that was, hey, that's my guy, gotta go. And then they'd all rally around. So then we will move on to, he leads me by quiet waters still. There's also going to be sheep who are smart and who will follow the shepherd and hold off at dabbling along the way and drinking from the little puddles. But then there's going to be the sheep who just say, hey, well, here's a little puddle and I'm thirsty and I'm going to drink this. And they end up getting dirty, muddy water from where the sheep have all walked through, peed, pooped, dropped hairballs, wool balls, whatever. But because these sheep are defiant and just like people, you have some who are going to do the right thing and, okay, well, I'm just going to hold on until we get to the clean water. These guys over here's like, no, you know what? I'm just going to drink this. It looks like it's got a little backwash in it. I don't care. I'm thirsty. And then they're just going to keep on going, and then that makes them sick, which then puts the other sheep at risk for being sick. So it's just so parallel. So he talks about the sheep that are going to be obedient and going to wait until they get to the clean water to drink. And then you have these ones who are going to just kind of suckle along on the mud puddles. Then he talks about he restores my soul. This one was probably one of my favorite learning lessons. And I was talking to Wade about it on the way to work the other morning. He's like, I'm ready for my lesson. Because every morning I'm like, la, 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 la. Like, guess what I learned today? But he talks about a cast sheep. I don't know if you've ever heard of a cast sheep. I had not heard of a cast sheep. And here is what it is. It is an Old English shepherd's term for a sheep that has turned over on its back and cannot get up by itself. A cast sheep is a very pathetic sight. It's laying on its back, its feet's in the air, it flays away frantically, struggling to stand up without success. Sometimes a little bleat for help will come out, but generally it just lays there lashing around, scared to death, like, ah, kind of like a turtle who's flipped over and can't get back over. And if the owner does not arrive on the scene within a reasonably short time, the sheep will die. This is but another reason why it is so essential for a careful sheepman to look over his flock every day, counting them to see that they are all able to get up and be on their feet. If one or two are missing, often the first thought to flash into the mind of the shepherd is, one of my sheep is cast somewhere. I must go search and set it on its feet again. This is when Jesus leaves the 99. Because one of us gets lost. One of us gets cast. We're flailing around. We're frantic. We've got ourselves off course. And he comes to look for us. He leaves the 99 who are okay, who are standing on their feet, grazing away, because one of us has cast. One of us is laying on our back, frantically flaying our legs or whatever. You know what I mean? But that was just so from the sheep's point of view, from our point of view, when we see Jesus, when we feel that knock and that urge and that whisper and that voice of him saying, I'm here to help you. And here we are flailing around. It just was, y'all, it just felt so comforting. I don't know. It says one particular ewe that I had owned in a flock of whatever that word is was notorious for being a cast sheep. She just kept on going. He'd flip her back over. She'd do her thing, and he'd find her cast again. She's, the wanderer. But anyway, it says, only my diligence made it possible for her to survive from one season to the next. One year, I had to be away from the ranch for a few days when she was having her problems. So I called my young son aside and told him he would be responsible for her well-being while I was absent. So he assigned his son to one sheep. This is the sheep. I need you to watch her. She goes wayside. I need you to reel her back when she's gone. I can see Jesus going, oh gosh, I got to keep my eye on this girl. You guys are good. I'm going to have to follow this girl. I ain't going to let her get away. Isn't that just, I don't know. I just love that. I just love it. So anyway, the shepherd has to keep their sharp eye out for cast sheep, but also for predators. The knowledge that any cast sheep is helpless, close to death, and vulnerable is what makes the whole problem of cast sheep serious for the manager. Nothing seems to arouse his constant care or diligent attention to the flock as the fact that even the largest, fattest, strongest, and sometimes healthiest sheep can become cast and a casualty. It says actually it's most often the fat sheep that are the most easily cast. And the way that it happens, he explains, is the heavy fat or long fleeced sheep will lay down comfortably in some little dirt hole that's got like a little hollow or a little depression, so it thinks, oh, I'm just gonna get comfy right in this little nook and cranny. And then all of a sudden it rolls on its side to stretch out and relax, and the next thing you know, the air in their, because they have multiple stomachs, the air in their stomachs floats up, and that causes them to become unbalanced, and the next thing you know, they're laying on their back because the air is now bloated up to which normally would be the bottom of their stomach. And so now it's almost like how, well, I won't get into that, but anyway, the air floats up here, so now they're stuck like this. And so now that they're stuck like this, the blood is now running from their little legs. They're losing the feeling of their legs, because you know how that feels when you lay on a body part too long, or you stretch your arm out too long and then you try to get up, how you can't have any feeling in it. So they are literally stuck there. And it says, so they turn on their back far enough no feet can touch the ground. They feel a sense of panic and start to paw the air frantically, which only makes it worse because the gases begin to build up in the rumen, and which are the stomachs, and they turn up, and now they tend to retard and cut off blood circulation to the extremities, especially the legs, and they can die within a few hours. And if the cast sheep is a ewe with lambs, of course, it's a multiple loss to the owner, because the lambs if they're unborn, they die within her. And if they're young and suckling, they become orphans. And all of this adds to the seriousness of the situation. So you can see where the shepherd would leave the safe flock to go find this one. So then it goes on to say, that he looks for buzzards. So the first thing that, he's always on guard. He's always on duty, always looking for the circling predators, because that would be a sign that, hey, if my numbers aren't here, there's a cast sheep, I need to go. And it just kind of gets his game plan and action for the day. He said as soon as he reaches the cast ewe, his first impulse is he wants to pick it up and turn it over and say, okay, let's go back. But he would tenderly roll the sheep over on its side. This would help to relieve the pressure of the gas in the rumen. If she had been down for long, I would have to lift her onto her feet, then straddle the sheep with my legs. I would hold her erect, rubbing her limbs to restore the circulation. This often took quite a long time, and when the sheep started to walk again, she often just stumbled, staggered, and collapsed in a heap once more. Remember, these sheep also have a ton of wool, and it gets wet and dirty and muddy. It's heavy, and now these things have been upside down, and now they're going to get back up. They're staggering around like they're drunk. So sometimes he would have to work on them for hours, and he would talk gently to them, to the sheep, comforting the sheep, just like how Jesus does when we get, he goes, you're okay. I've got you. Let's get you right back on the path again that we had you going on. Let's put that one foot right in front of the other. I got you. I got you. Let's get you back to what you need to be doing to, to keep drawing near to me, be in your word, study the scriptures, walk in your purpose, do the things that you were created to do, just instead of wandering towards the world, you need to wander back toward Christ. And then, let's see. At this point, it's important to point out the similarly in the Christian life that there is an exciting and comforting parallel. Many people have the idea that when a child of God falls, when he is frustrated and helpless in a spiritual dilemma, that God becomes disgusted, fed up, and even furious with them. It's simply not so. One of the greatest revelation of the heart of God given to us by Christ is that of himself as our shepherd. He has the same identical sensations of anxiety, concern, and compassion for cast men and women as I had for my cast sheep. The next one is, he guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. It talks about sheep are notorious creatures of habits. If he left them to themselves, they would follow the same trail until they became ruts, graze the same hill until they turned to desert waste, and pollute their own ground until it is corrupt with disease and parasites. One of the main things that they had to deal with back then was not much lush land. So they had to circulate their sheep. They would have their property with ancient boundary stones. They would have the property that they would have their sheep graze on, and they would have to, as the seasons changed, so did the moving of the sheep. So in wintertime, they would stay close to the home, the ranch, so to speak, so that they could be in cover and well taken care of. They could be fed what they were fed. But as the spring and summer came, and the grasses and the snow from the mountains would melt down, they would move higher up. And what that would do, I'm trying to condense this because it's getting long, and what that would do is to help the sheep bring pollinate. They would help to pollinate from the low ground to the high ground, because it was so hot in the higher areas. Once the snow melted and the waters would flow down, that nothing would grow. So the sheep in their coats, in their woolly coats, would bring up little branches and little plants and little seeds, and as they would go up there, they would be dropping these things off, and it would repopulate and refertilize and replant the pastures as they rotated. So I'm telling you, God is amazing. Who would have thunk of all of this? And so they get up to the top, and that's had all year to kind of grow and flourish in the nooks and crannies where the snow was not. And it would just be lush, and they would have shelter, they would have food, they would have fresh water from the streams that were thawing out and melting down. And so they would have this lushness. So where they had just left and grazed and ate everything, because they eat everything. They are like a goat. They just eat everything, even the thistles, the thorns, anything. There's certain plants that they eat that can make them sick, but that's part of the shepherd's responsibility is to go before them. So they would have shepherd helpers that would go before them and uproot the things that were not good for them. And that's how they did it back then. And unlike us, where we have these big tilling machines that go in there and just till everything up all together, they would be meticulous because their sheep were their livelihood. And they would be meticulous in going and picking out specific plants that were toxic to the babies, especially, and just kind of keep them moving and keep them going up to higher ground. And they called a lot of the shepherds would let their land, he kept using the word derelict land, that had been sheeped to death. It means the absentee of the owner had rented the place to a tenant. The tenant simply loaded the ranch with sheep and left them to pretty much fend on their own. And it would desolate that area. So the sheep had nothing, and the sheep would get sick, and they would be thin, and they would not produce, strong babies, and the babies would die. And so it was just desolation. And all this happened simply because the sheep, instead of being managed and handled with intelligent care, had been left to struggle for themselves. The consequence of such indifference is that the sheep gnaw the grass to the very ground until even the roots are damaged. So, it just goes to show how important the shepherd's job is in taking care. And anyway, it's just, y'all, it's so good. I hope y'all get this book to read it, because I am really not doing it justice. So even though I walk through the valley, now the valley that he was talking about, and like I was saying, at the change of the seasons, they're going up through the mountain, the valley of the two mountains. And what has to happen is, even though they know that on the other side of this mountain they could go out and about and around or whatever, but the sheep wouldn't make the journey. They're gonna have to go through the valley of shadow, through the valley that has unpredictable storms that pop up, unpredictable time of days that the light is peeking through. So you may travel at different times of the day than usual. So it's going to throw your schedule off. But even though you're having to go through that valley, on the other side is the luscious pasture that you're trying to get your sheep through. So you're going to go through that, and you're going to depend on the shepherd to get you through there. So the sheep, they don't know. They just follow him. He's going this way. This is the way we're going. And while in the midst of doing all of that, they lead there persistently. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, it does not say I die there or stop there, but rather I walk through. So the same thing with the sheep. They're not going in there to die. They're going in there to get to the other side. That's all they need to know. And they say that it's customary to use this verse as a consolation to those who are passing through the dark valley of death. But even here, for the child of God, death is not an end, but merely the door into a higher and more exalted life of intimate contact with Christ. Death is but the dark valley opening out into an eternity of delight with God. And the Good Shepherd knows this. This is one reason why he told us, surely I am with you always. Yes, even in the valley of death. What a comfort that is. Y'all, and another thing is, just for an eyeball, these are tens of thousands of sheep. This isn't just like a couple dozen of sheep. These are tens of thousands of sheep that this manager, this shepherd, is in charge of. And while he has helpers, he is the overseer of all things. Let's see. Okay, let me just keep going, because I didn't mean for this to get this long. And so now we're out of the valley. We're into your rod and your staff, they comfort me. This was pretty cool, because when the shepherd is young, he is instructed to go get a rod, which is like a young sapling, and they whittle it out themselves, because this is a weapon. It's not a gentle little prodding, let's go this way. This is a weapon, and these shepherds become so skilled at this that they can, it's like a javelin. They can throw it and nail a snake way over there if it's threatening their sheep. That's how important these tools were for them. I don't think it actually says weapon, but that's what it was used for, a club. He used it for, separating them and leading them in a forceful way, not just like, do, go this way. It's in a, because sheep are strong and they have to be kind of, you know what I mean? And he talks about a time that he went to Africa, and his guide was, they wanted to roll this boulder over. And so the guy had his rod the whole time, which is shaped like a little club. He held it in his hand the whole time. So it's almost like he's one-handed, because this club is the protector. This is what is going to protect them from anything that happens to pop out. And just so happens when they rolled that boulder over, there was a king cobra there who instantly arose ready to strike, and he threw the club, how, you know, they're taught to throw, and killed the snake. So these things, I can't, in fact, I can't fathom that myself. But, and then the staff was another sapling that they would get, and they would carve it out into the shape of a hook, kind of like, you know, like a shepherd's hook. And these would be used to reach sheep who have fallen into, you know, deep water, or fallen off the edge of the ledge or whatever, and they would have to kind of like scoop and guide the sheep back up, use it almost like a third arm then, because now they've got a lot longer utensil to pull the sheep out. So both of these were used. They weren't, you didn't have one or the other, they had both, and they were very good at using them for what their intended use was. And it's such a comforting fact to know Jesus does the same thing. He leads and guides us through the conviction. The discernment of our heart is our rod to kind of keep us, you know, protected from the things coming, you know, that we can fall off in. And then if we do get too far astray, he can use that staff to kind of hook us back and say, come on back this way. Let's stay where we're going. Anyway, that's how I picture it in my head. You can picture it ever how you want. And you prepare a table before me. So the table was actually, in this concept, kind of like getting to the top of the hilltop, where it was just kind of flat land, and the grass had grown, and they've, you know, redeposited the seeds and pollinated and stuff that I was talking about earlier. So it's had time to grow. So now the table has been set from last year's comings and goings and things like that. So now the snow is melted, the water has watered, everything is lush and green. The table has been set before me. And it is provided within the presence of the enemies, being the coyotes and the wolves and the bears and the lions and the buzzards and all the attacking animals. There's places for them to hide. There's crevices for them to be able to rest in at night. And there's protection for them, even though they're on top of the hill. They've made it to the top of, their grazing lands. They have protection from that, because the shepherd is strategic in how he takes care of his sheep. All right, let's keep going. Number 9. So that's, you've set the table before me. You anoint my head with oil. You might have read something about this, but there's like bugs that really can get into sheep. The main one that really bothers them are the nasal flies. They get in there because it's so dry everywhere. They lay their eggs in the nostril of the sheep. The larvae hatch, and they go up into their brain and causes inflammation. And because it's all, to me, I'm thinking it's like tinnitus. You hear this buzzing and you've got this stuff going on in your head. They start running into things. They run into rocks, they run into trees, trying to just get that to be quiet. They can get violently ill enough where they will kill themselves by going into and running into the rock over and over and over and over again. And they can also injure other animals, especially the babies, because it's, you know, spring and summer, the babies are all around. And if these flies are up in there getting into the bigger sheep's brains and making them crazy, they're going to get trampled on. So that was one thing. So the oil, and they use a salve and an oil that they would put on the sheep's head, that would soothe them and calm their anxiety. Could you imagine? I don't know about you, but these love bugs, if you've walked out into an open field where there's just nothing but you and the bugs, and they're all over you, it's enough to make you have almost like a panicky feeling. And so think of them going up your nose, flying around your face. You know, put yourself in the sheep's spot for a minute. It'd make you crazy. So anyway, they would anoint every one of the sheep. All the shepherds had this. They would use like an olive oil, some kind of, what is like a talum balm or something. They would put like spices in it so that it would be like kind of a soothing, calming smell. They used things like that. And they would put that in the nostrils of the animal and wherever else, like the ears, wherever else the flies were, and that would, get rid of the flies. There's another thing called scab, which would be a little parasite that they would pick up along the way. And if your flock didn't have them, and then you bought in new sheep from another flock that had a low, like a low count of them, it would spread like wildfire because they usually are on the sheep's head, and the sheep would butt and move each other around, and it's just enough to get the little parasite from one sheep head to another, and the next thing you know, it spreads everywhere. And what they would do is they would have to take them and dunk them in a Dunkin' tank, a dipping tank. So then they would literally have to, like, I'll let you read the story. But anyway, they have to dunk them, and they have to dunk them one at a time. You can't just do them big because you have to get a tank. You have to have the stuff. So each sheep had to be inspected. Tens of thousands of sheep we're talking about. So they would so when it would also say, your rod covers me and protects me. I think it gets towards the back of it. Let's see but anyway, it says something about passing under the rod. That was indicate that one at a time the sheep would pass under the rod, and the shepherd would inspect the sheep, check out his head, go up under the wool, because the wool is super, super thick, but yet the skin of a sheep is very thin. And they would check to see how sick the sheep was, how bad the parasite had gotten into them, according to how they would treat them as far as with the dipping. Did they have to shear them completely? So that was another thing. When they would get scabbed, the ewes and lambs would rapidly lose condition and begin to drop in weight. They would go off milking, and their lambs would stop growing gainfully. I talked about head butting and things like that. He talks about, this is the exact picture of irritation in my own life. How easy is it for there to be a fly in the ointment of even my most lofty spiritual experience? So he's saying, like, even the small petty little things can become so much larger when it seems like they're coming at you all at once. Even if it's just little things, when they hit you all at once, it can cause you to go into this state of anxiety. And what is happening? Why is this happening to me? Same thing when you're getting attacked by flies up your nose, in my opinion. And then we're almost done, y'all. So he's just talking about anointing their head with oil, just like another thing is they would have to do is towards the fall, when they would prepare, as the earth prepares for winter, the flocks are also subtle to changes. This is the season of the rut, of mating, of great battles between the rams for possession of the ewes. So the necks of the older rams would swell, they would grow strong, they would get into rut. And the shepherds know all about this, and he knows that some of the sheep are actually strong enough to kill the other sheep and to injure and maim them. And so what he would do, the remedy of that is, this time of the year, he would catch the rams and smear their heads with grease. I used to apply generous quantities of axle grease to the head and the nose of each ram. So when they collided, their great crashing battles with the lubricant would make them glance off each other in such a ludicrous way that they stood there feeling rather stupid and frustrated. And so it kind of calmed their testosterone down, I guess. I don't know. But then he goes into talking about comparing it to, people knocking each other around. But I'm just trying to stick on to the sheep right here. Talking about the shepherd, he never is actually really asleep. He's always aware. Most of us are glad when things go well. Surely goodness will follow surely goodness and love will follow me. So then as we're getting toward the end, he's talking about surely the goodness of God will follow us everywhere we go, which is true even in bad times. We can always, after the fact, see the silver lining, know why we were brought through this, but in the midst of it, it's really, really hard. But if we keep knowing in our heart that we are being led by a shepherd who loves us and cares for us and wants the best for us, and he's always, always got our best interest in mind. But we've got to be able to trust that even when it's hard, even when it doesn't feel good, and even when we think that my life is over, I can't do anything else. What could possibly good come out of this? He always pulls through for our goodness and for his glory. So that when you look back and you reflect, and you're like, oh my gosh, yes. It's just, you can't help but to share that. Those are the testimonies that move people. When they know you and they know where you were, they know what you were going through, and they look at you now, they're like, oh, but God, because girl, I know where you were. Ain't no way you were getting out of that alive. But here you are. So yeah. And the ones, I guess that was kind of as we were getting to the end. Surely goodness will follow me. He longs for love, my love, and I love him. It's talking about just how much he loves God and how much we are loved by God. And the only reason that we love him is because he first loved us. And when we are doing well, it pleases God. It's like a parent being so proud of their child. It's like seeing your children grow up and do things that, as a young person, you're like, oh, I wish I would have loved to have done that when I was young. And yet here they go flying from the nest and they're succeeding. It just makes you so proud. God's the same way. He puts in us these desires. And when we step into them and we walk in obedience to them and we grow in them and we fly, even though we have doubts, he's like, oh, that's my girl. You know what I mean? That's my relationship with him, at least. I know it makes him happy. I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. A lot of times people will think this just means like the church building or the church institute, but it's really not. It says, here is a sheep so utterly satisfied with its lot in life, so fully contented with the care it receives, so much at home with the shepherd that there is not a shred of desire for a change. Stated in simple, direct, rather rough ranch language, it would be put like this: nothing will ever make me leave this outfit. It's great. So now he's talking about the sheep's point of view from reading this whole story. The sheep are at the fence talking to the other sheep across the fence, saying, yeah, man, this gig is good. We're not going nowhere. We got it made. So the sheep on the other side was, man, I would sure like to have some of what you got. And this brings me to the story where the sheep would wait for the water to recede and they would sneak around because they'd had their eyes on the prize over there. And so they have gone out and about to get over there. And this is where I'm going to end on because it is really, really long. Because I don't know, when I read it twice this morning because I'm like, oh my gosh, that is just so true. So let me just find the beginning of it so I can read it in context to you. Sometimes I feel we Christians should be much more like this. We should be proud to belong to Christ. Why shouldn't we feel free to boast to others how good our shepherd is? How glad we should be to look back and recall all the amazing ways in which he had provided for our welfare. We should delight to describe in detail the hard experiences which he has brought us from, and we should be eager and quick to tell our confidence in Christ. I could never meditate on this last phrase in the psalm without here welling up in my memory a vivid scene of some of the early days of my first sheep ranch. So he's talking about the sheep. These poor neglected creatures under the ownership of a heartless rancher had nothing known but suffering most of the year. They were thin and sick with disease and scab and parasites. Tormented by flies and attacked by predators, some were so weak and thin and wretched that their thin legs could scarcely bear their scanty frames. But there was always seemed to lurk in their eyes the slender, faint hope that perhaps with a little bit of luck they could break through the fence or crawl through some hole to free themselves. Occasionally, this would happen. At the first chance, they would go down to the tidal flats, slip around the end of the fence, and come sneaking up to gorge themselves on our rich green pastures. So pitiful and pathetic was their condition that the sudden feast of lush feed, in which they were unaccustomed to, proved disastrous. Their digestive systems would begin to scour, and sometimes this led to death. I clearly recall coming across 3 of my neighbor's ewes lying helpless under a tree near the fence. I scooped them up, put them in a wheelbarrow, and wheeled them back to their heartless owner. He simply pulled out a sharp knife, slit their throats, and he couldn't care less. What a picture of Satan, who holds ownership over so many. Right there, the graphic account Jesus portrayed of himself as being the door and the entrance by which sheep were to enter his fold flashed before my eyes. Those poor sheep had not come into my ranch through the proper gate. I had never let them in. They had never really become mine. They had not come under my ownership or control. If they had, they would have not suffered so. Even starting out under my management, they would have been given very special care. First, they would have been put on dry, limited food, and he goes on to read about that. But in short, they tried to get in on their own. It simply spelt disaster. Likewise, with those apart from Christ, the old world is a pretty wretched ranch, and Satan is a heartless owner. He cares not a whit for men's souls or welfare. Under his tyranny, there are hundreds of hungry, discontented hearts who long to enter into the household of God, who ache for his care and concern. So I just thought that was just, I don't know. It says, yet there is only one way into this fold, and that is through the owner, Jesus Christ himself, the good shepherd. He boldly declares, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved, and he will come in and go out and find pasture. And that's John 10:9. It's like he says, every day I am literally rubbing shoulders with men and women on the other side of the fence. What is my impact upon them? My life, so satisfying, so radiant, because I walk and talk and live with God, that they become envious. It's my personal conviction is that this is the most significant sentiment that David had in his heart as he ended this hymn of praise to divine diligence. So y'all, I hope you get the book, because I could not do justice. Just the way I can now read this psalm, I can visualize sheep, their neediness that goes into so much more detail on the neediness of sheep, and just how recognizing the Lord as our good shepherd and our caregiver and the one who protects us and comforts and provides and leads and just corrects and heals and all the things. We need that in our life. We can't do it by ourselves. And just like the ending of the book was saying, is that if you don't come through the right gate, you're not part of the flock. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He's the only way. Nobody gets to God except through him. It's there in John. And it just, I don't know, y'all. I apologize that the video is 58 minutes long, but I had a really good time sharing this book. I know it got a little rambly, but that's okay. You can fast forward it if you want. I just hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you got some encouragement from it. I hope that you will kind of take a minute and reflect on your own personal relationship, and just make sure in your heart that you know that you know that you know that you've had this conversation with God, that you've invited Christ into your heart, that you want him to be Lord and Savior over your life. You want to be kept in line. You want to be taught You want to learn. You want to spiritually grow. You want to go through your trials and tribulations that we all are going through, whether you're in Christ or out of Christ. You're still going to go through them. But going through them can be just a shadow instead of darkness. And I just want to encourage you guys to, just kind of sit back and take an account of where you are. And I'm always open for talking or chatting. You can message me anytime. And I appreciate you guys hanging in there for this video. I'm going to make it go a few more seconds because it's going to hit an hour, and I ain't never done one for an hour. So anyway, I appreciate you guys watching the video. And if this you did get some encouragement, just make sure to like and subscribe. There's a lot of people that watch my videos that aren't actually subscribed because YouTube keeps telling me, your subscribers are not, these people are not subscribed or whatever. And I'm like, okay. So I'm just telling you guys, if you want to watch my video, I'd like it if you subscribe and give me a thumbs up, drop me a comment, all those things that YouTube seems to like. And yeah, we're officially an hour. Okay, I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next video.